Hello, friends. Welcome to another life coaching session. This session, I would walk you through a story in which you will understand how, as a life coach, I assisted one of my clients who was having difficulty to choose between two very good options. Meet Ronald. Ronald is a mid-senior level manager and is right now quite stuck in a dilemma. If you observe, Ronald is doing quite well in his job. He has, per se, related to his role or work or his team, no major issues. But there is something which has pushed Ronald into a state of immense stress, confusion, and he finds himself extremely like in a place where he's like annoyed. And all he does all the time is evaluating those two options, which are even keeping him awake at night. The very reason for this Ronald's state of mind and body is that he had two options. The story goes like this. Ronald has been working in an organization for close to around 15 years. He's quite successful in his role and his job. And over a period of almost 15 years, he has not just grown professionally in this organization up the ladder, but even at the personal front. The organization where he's part of has always been supportive, hence, most of his personal life, major events like his marriage, his first child, most of that is connected to this particular working organization, which supported him in many of such milestones and major turning points in his life. So Ronald kind of have a very emotional connect with the way, uh, with not just the organization, but also the people around here. But at the same time, he, without even applying to a job, he has been offered an opportunity, maybe by some freelancers or somebody who scout talent, into a role which is something that Ronald always wanted to pursue. Now, friends, in a given organization, we may have a lot of positive things in our role and job, but there's always some gap and scope of improvement. So in case of Ronald as well, he's done really well and he's also up for promotion next year. But this opportunity, which came to him from a very remote location, by an agency who scout talent, and they found his profile to be an exact match. Ronald now find himself into a dilemma because both the options of whether to stay in this organization where he had all those meaningful connection, professional and personal growth, and more, there's a still lot more that he's been offered to do. And on the other end, a dream role that he always wanted to get into. This has actually put Ronald into a very stressful state. Something that he never thought, that there are like two real good options, and he's just not able to make up his mind as to what and which one should he choose. And a result of this now slowly started to show on his behavior, his constant being engaged in evaluating the present to the future, the present to the future, to any work that he does, because somehow he's trying to get an answer as to what has that defect which he can let go and move on and either say a no to that offer or start thinking of taking that up and saying a no to the present and a very pleasant status quo that he's in. When Ronald and I started to work on his life coaching assignment on this decision making, The very first thing that I explained, Ronald, I mean, even though he's somebody with 15 years of work experience, I said, Ronald, let me first help you with some basics, which is that decision making is not really a process when it comes to life coaching. So when you really are caught up into a dilemma, there will be a method or technique that I would use, which I then help you eventually arrive at your own final decision taken by you yourself. And he was quite curious to learn more on that. So I began by helping him with starting it with the basics. And I said, decisions, Ronald, is before we even get there, adapt a beginner's approach. You may be a project lead, you may have had taken many decisions, and there could be, the entire concept as well. But now that you've come in here and that you're part of a life coaching assignment, let's begin as a beginner. So first understand that when you take a decision or you make a decision, what you choose, I wrote this for him, is that it's like out of the many options, you exercise a choice. And when you make that choice, what we choose, which means the rest other options are given up. So one end, it's like you just take on this one thing, the rest will automatically collapse, which means you are just letting them go. And if you find yourself stuck or quite confused, then we need to pay attention to the rest other options, which automatically dies down when you choose this one option. Does they have any kind of emotional value or connect in it? And that is precisely why this circle makes it a difficult process. So trying to explain him the coaching parlance of decision making and not the typical organization decision making process. And to this, he actually came up with a much more detailed narration of his side of story. What was really keeping him confused? Why was he evaluating both the offers? Why was he feeling stressed? Despite that, he, at his experience, was not very alien to this concept of doing a SWOT analysis, as they say it in a corporate. But why? The why is where he was confused. And that's exactly where I asked him that we need to figure out the emotional appeal in the other options. And that's exactly what is holding you back. So in order to do so, I gave him this figure. I said, this is your option one. This door is your present job. And this is option two. That's your new job, that the dream role that you've just been offered. Now, when you find both are equally good, there's actually not much that you could find fault with either of them. What would you do in such a situation? And I gave him some time to think through, along with some deep dive sessions we did. And one of the things that I started with when we started this very process of decision making was to help Ronald understand his core values. Friends, most of us are not aware that core values, like things that are very important to us, they actually are our core values. Our values keep changing, shifting over a period of time, but this is what really drives us. So many times, most of us are not aware. And if in case you're listening to this and you find yourself also in similar situations like Ronald, just go back to your core values. What matters to you the most? That's how a value is defined, in very simple words. And if you know your core values, just list them down and connect that to your decision, which will help you really get that clarity as to which option you should choose. The same principle applied in Ronald's case. We did this core value exercise. It's a lengthy one, and there are 5 or 7 different ways to understand our core values. To Ronald, I gave a very simple approach. I gave him a bunch of values, almost close to around 35, and I said, you need to just pick 3 from it and let me know what's really important to you at this point in time. Now, how he arrived at those 3 was based on our 2 deep dive sessions we did, and he was able to finally arrive at his core values. Now, what you see on your screen is a 3-step method that we followed, helping Ronald arrive at his decision. The core values here is, just a second, yeah. The core values here is, as per Ronald's a long 3-week work, he came up with these 3. Health, for him, he had a family history of, it's again a long story, but a family history which actually led him to choose health as his first core value, where his health was of utmost importance. Second came his family, which was his child and his spouse. He had, both his parents passed away, so it's just his family, and he had no siblings. And third one was the freedom. So freedom, as per Ronald's word, was his own ability to work at time that he sometimes may not want to or may want to, freedom of time, freedom of choosing how he would, schedule his day, and even his other extracurricular activities. So basis on our very deep dive conversations, these were the 3 core values Ronald came up with. Then I said, fine, Ronald, let's keep this here. Let's go to the step 2. The step 2 here was, of the 2 options you have, the present job with all the plus points and the future job with all the plus points. Now, in each of these options, regardless of all the plus points they hold, pick out minimum negative points from each option. And again, I gave him some, in fact, I guess I gave him a week's time, which he did, and came up with 5 negative points in option 1 and 4 in option 2. And finally, I said the final step that we're going to do here is a commitment-based approach. Now, Ronald was a little surprised, and he said, what's this? So I explained him that when you are able to identify your values, you need to now sync it with the options. So you find that in the options, option 1 has more negative points and option 2 has a 1 less negative point, which is a 4. And here are your core values. So you have 2 data sets. Now you need to decide basis on this, sync it up with your options and what's really important to you. If your option 1, regardless of this negative points, which is a step 2, none of your core values sync up with it, then I think you should choose option 2. But if you evaluate the core values and see that none of it sync up with option 2, then you should choose option 1. You also, along with the negative points, I helped Ronald arrive at syncing up his core values with the options given. So let's say the option 1 was being in his present job, which has all good points. And they also synced up with his core values of health, meaning the current job gave him the time, flexibility to work from home, to go to office, to take calls at his own ease, his own time and schedule. Plus, there were many other perks and benefits that extended to him and his family, and the freedom of time, which he always wanted to indulge in his extracurricular activities, which were more toward his contribution to certain NGOs. All of those were, while he evaluated that with option 1 and 2, he found that they were more syncing along with option 1, even though option 1 had more negative points than option 2. And basis on this, I said, now you decide that these are your core values, things that are really important to you. Now that's what drives you. So choose things which are more important to you rather than choosing things on your own experiences or positive or negative aspects of life. So hence, with the combination of core values, the negative points, finally, I gave him the third step of commitment where I said, when you approach a decision, Ronald, approach it as an intention, as a commitment, not as a resolution. Because how we approach a thing makes a huge difference, not just in our body, but also in our head. So when you begin with an I statement, so just like how positive affirmations work and help people get rid of their negative mindset, similarly, an approach where we begin a statement with an I and say, I have decided. I said, whatever you work here, the core values, the points, and there was a lot more deep dive sessions, data that all got into it, finally arriving here at I have decided. I said, you make it, you write it down. Because writing has a neuroscience to it. And when we write it down, it's like you're promising your own self. And when I say to approach it as an intention and not as a resolution, the very idea behind that also was to commit to it. And there's again a neuroscience to it, friends. When we approach things as an intention, they work because we make an intention starting with an I. And I is where you're addressing your own self in first person and you committing to your own self. And when you apply these principles of your own self and write, I have decided. This, in a way, is creating a cognitive restructuring in your head, which then helps you stay stuck to the, sorry, not stuck is may not be the appropriate word. Stay committed to the decision you have taken. You won't do the second guessing part here, which Ronald was actually into it. And this is something I gave him on purpose. It's not necessary. Each one of us may need to take this third step. But in case of Ronald, when we are into the second guess mode of arriving at a decision and then again like going like, oh, wait, let me think. I guess, and you kind of fiddle around with your options. That's where you need to rewire your brain by approaching the whole thing as an intention. The moment you make it as an intention and you start with a statement of I and then write it down, it makes a phenomenal change at your subconscious level, because now you are rewriting the script in your subconscious mind. And that's where it makes it much more easier to stay aligned with the decision that you've made and not second guess and go back to it and go forth in it. And that's what happened here. So if in case you ever find yourself, just a simple thing starts with an I, use it as an intention and write it down. I have decided, and write whatever you've decided, and you see the difference. So finally, Ronald was able to, it was a 2-month coaching assignment we did, and he was able to choose the best out of the best from all the 2 good options he had. So friends, if you find yourself in situations very similar to Ronald and may feel that this is kind of hampering your current professional life, or just getting you into a web of stress, negativity, and you find yourself completely stuck just because of this one step you can't go forward with, here are the coordinates, and you also have the link to apply and enroll. And I look forward to meet you in our next coaching assignment where we together learn to decide. Thank you.